Hello, everybody. I'd just like to say once more that thank you so much for being here. We are waiting for 2 more of our speakers to join, and then we can start the event. All right, we can start now. Hello, thank you all so much for being here and joining us at this side event for the United Nations Science, Technology, and Innovation Forum, or the United Nations STI Forum, organized with the Caucasian Universities Alliance, Young Women Leaders for Planetary Health, and Women Leaders for Planetary Health. My name is Vildan, founder of Young Women Leaders for Planetary Health, a proud student of Fayetteville Manlius High School, and the co-moderator for this event.
Hello all and welcome to this special event. I am happy to be co-moderating with Vildan, and I want to take a moment to also thank her for her efforts to make this event happen in the first place, so thank you. I currently work at a tech company to help innovate and build better technology for public services and the humanitarian sector. I hold a gender and policy master's degree from the LSE and have conducted research on young girls in the diaspora in London. In the past, I've worked closely with immigrant and refugee youth, something I'm very passionate about, on issues such as access to education, violence against women and girls, and women leadership. I'd like to also thank Emin Sorgtaş, the leader of our He for She group, for helping us coordinate this event and helping us with technical matters. So the reason that we're all here today and hearing each other is thanks to him. Additionally, I'd like to add that our viewers can also watch this event live on YouTube right now and can access it there after the event as well. So we can send out the links if needed or wanted. Vildan, over to you.
Thank you. In recent years, there has been growing recognition of the important role that women play in driving progress and development, and of the importance of gender equality in the fields of science, technology, and innovation, or STI. However, women remain significantly underrepresented in these fields, even though including women is a crucial step in fighting current global environmental and health crises, such as climate change, and in promoting planetary health, as women can bring new experiences and perspectives to make more effective policies. Thus, we must keep the topic of gender equality among the most discussed and urgent global agenda items. We must also develop new systems and approaches to deconstructing gender stereotypes from early childhood, investing in women leadership in the digital and green transition. We must focus on the developing world and make more funds available for them, increase the exposure to female leaders by increasing their visibility, and fight gender-based organizational cultures, structures, and processes in academia, politics, the labor market, and the education market. This UN side event's purpose is to discuss these topics, and in particular, the topic of increasing gender equality in STI in order to advance in planetary health and in the fight against current global environmental and health crises, such as climate change.
Firstly, we're honoured to introduce Senator Rachel May, who will be giving us her opening remarks. Senator Rachel May is a New York State Senator. She's currently the chair of Cities to Committee, which focuses on urbanization, and the Legislative Commission on Rural Resources. Senator May is also a member of the Committees on Environmental Conservation, Health, and Legislative Women's Caucus. Senator May, thank you so much for being here today. I would now like to invite you to deliver your opening remarks as we begin this side event. Thank you.
Well, thank you for that kind introduction and for the invitation. I really am excited to be here. Vildan, you seem to be doing amazing things at a young age, and I can't wait to see how this develops. The idea of the Young Women Leaders for Planetary Health, just as a title, it's inspiring and just a beautiful concept. I can't call myself a young woman leader, but I am very proud to be here to open this event and welcome everybody. So I'm one of the very few legislators in the state of New York who has a science background, and the subset of women in that group is much smaller. So I can say from my experience, we need a lot more women in STEM fields in general, but also more women to study sciences and go into government roles. Not just because diversity is a good thing, but because I think women often do science differently, talk about scientific ideas differently, and use and share scientific knowledge differently. And that can have a big influence on policy. I don't want to be reductive. I don't want to stereotype people, but in my experience, the women I know in science have come to that field not because they want the right answer, but because they want to ask the right questions. And I think having gender and ethnic diversity in science is one of the reasons why we're seeing a shift, especially in public health research. It used to be, if you asked a question about, say, the public health impact of air pollution, it would be normal to have a study sample that was mostly white men between the ages of 30 and 50, because that's what study samples looked like. But if I'm in the room, or other people with other priorities are going to point out that it's really important to know the effects on children, on the elderly, on pregnant women, and that communities of color are the most likely to bear the brunt of air pollution in the first place. And so if we don't have diverse studies of what the effects are, we're not going to really know what the effects are. And that's just one example. I think women, on the whole, tend to take a more holistic and I would say more pragmatic approach. If we're going into scientific fields with all the demands that those fields have on us, plus all the residual demands that women face in our everyday lives, we can't be bothered with just publishing stuff for the sake of publishing. We want to know that what we're doing is making a difference. And that attitude carries over into the policy arena. I wanted to give an example from my work on the climate field, because I know that's a focus here. So since I've been in the Senate, I came into the Senate in 2019, and we have taken a number of really important steps to address the climate crisis within the state of New York. In 2019, my first year in office, we passed the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act, which is the most ambitious climate law of any state in the country. And it was ambitious not just because it set ambitious targets for reducing greenhouse gas emissions, but also because it insists that the benefits of the policies that we implement and the investments we make should be concentrated in communities most affected by carbon emissions and global warming, which means coastal communities and low-income communities of color primarily. It was also ambitious in the way we put the bill together, and I had a lot to do with this. This was really important to me when I came into office, to kind of change the way we were doing business in Albany. So Typically before then, if there were hearings on a bill, the hearings would be held in Albany, maybe one in New York City. But I insisted that we have hearings all over the state about this and many other issues. But I was particularly concerned that we could hear from people in my area of the state in central New York, where we have the SUNY College of Environmental Science and Forestry. We wanted to hear from forestry professionals about the impacts and the potential for our forest resources to make a difference in this area. We wanted to hear from agricultural professionals in my Finger Lakes region. We wanted to hear from some of the rural communities that were going to be affected differently, where, you know, may be much harder to implement, say, electrified transportation policies. So getting everybody to the table and making sure that we were hearing all of those voices was something that was important to me. And I can't necessarily say it was important to me because I'm a woman, but I do think having women at the table means we are listening to a lot more voices than we might have been listening to before. So I assume that this is a group of people who are either in scientific careers or heading in that direction. I really hope that we can spur more women to think about pursuing scientific careers because it is just so absolutely critical, but I also to think about taking that experience and bringing it into the policy arena, because we need your help in asking the right questions for the decades to come, and making sure that we're being honest and getting a complete picture of what the issues are and what needs to be done about them. So thank you again for having me, and I wish you all the best for I can't stay much longer, but I can stay a little bit and hear what else is going on. But thank you so much for the invitation and for everything you're doing. And I want to know what happens next. I hope you will follow up with me. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Senator May, and thank you so much for being here. It's very insightful to learn about your experiences. And it was just a delight to have you speak here. Thank you. So for our speakers, we will have 2 rounds of questions, and each of our distinguished speakers will answer 1 question each round. Now I'd like to introduce our first speaker, Dr. Bildur Akkaya. Dr. Akkaya is an assistant professor at the Department of Neurology at The Ohio State University. Her research revolves around multiple sclerosis and neuroimmunology, and she has studied T-cell biology for more than a decade on a range of subjects. Dr. Akkaya also has her own lab at The Ohio State University, which she established in 2021. Dr. Akkaya, thank you so much for being with us today. Our question to you is, you are an accomplished woman scientist and have your own lab in Ohio State University. What challenges have you faced in pursuing a career in science? What other challenges and gender-biased organizational structures, especially in academia, can women face in pursuing opportunities in this field?
Thank you very much for the generous introduction, and it's a great pleasure to be here. I am deeply honored to get invited to speak here. I'm usually used to speaking at events where I describe my research and explain results. So this is the very first for me to speak in such a platform. So great honor. Thank you. So I have a few slides actually, because I looked into the metrics of this. Vildan, will you be able to just show them just to make the points? These are not exhaustive, because the numbers really struck me as I looked into the number of women exiting academia in their later career stages. So we usually, will I be able to share or? Okay, so I think I'll be able to share. All right. Hope everybody's able to see my screen.
We can see it, thank you.
Okay. So what's really struck me when I looked into the graphs in terms of the numbers of number of women leaving the academia, It looks like at the bachelor's and master's level, the numbers, the percentages of men and women are very comparable. And then as the career stages progress, the women go on to PhDs, postdocs, and then take on their first academic jobs and then become full professors. They keep leaving academia. And it's really striking. Why? I kept thinking, why? And I kind of have an idea about why, because it is a male-dominated area, but it is not just that. So we don't really understand the unique challenges that women may face. And especially this period really overlaps with the time women start families. And it is not really surprising to see that women with more caring responsibilities start to leave academia. And they are also facing an increased pressure to be more men-like in men-dominated areas. So what do I mean by saying that? So we don't see ourselves bringing in our natural self. So we try to, at an increasing rate, we try to pretend that we are, woman, XX chromosomes in trousers. And in this high pressure environment, few women can survive really. And I think we need to look into the higher education institutions about how they can change these trends. I'll just give a few personal examples. I was at a meeting during the weekend with my kids. And although the meetings nowadays, they provide childcare support, it is not enough. So I have, for example, an 11-year-old girl and a 13-year-old boy. And I was really into bringing them in with me to listen to the talks, to get inspired. My son and the daughter. And my daughter, to be honest, she's more excited about hearing about science subjects than my son, who is a math geek. But this doesn't mean that my daughter is not interested in being in STEM. So I think we need to think about unique ways. So not just putting a childcare with a few cribs in the room. We just need to think outside the box how we can drive women more into these fields. When the women start in their bachelor's and master's, I'll show you some other statistics about that. So in STEM fields especially, women that just don't participate. They don't see themselves in the STEM fields. This is because there is something we are doing wrong right here at the childhood period. And this is a question I keep thinking about every single day because, I'm a mother as well. I am raising a daughter and a son, and I am trying to break the stereotypes as much as I can every single day. So I think we need to see ourselves establishing sustainable pipelines to drive more women into fields that are dominated by men currently. Women leadership role models, they help. So there are, in my field, when I look at the National Institute of Health, there is more women leadership at the director level. So there are new directors of NCI, Cancer Institute, and the Immunology Institute, who are women. These certainly help those role models, but these are not enough to sustain the pipeline. So, I would like to summarize the problems here, and I won't take too much of your time. So the research suggests that after establishing their academic careers in STEM, women are 2 times more likely to leave academia compared to men. And there is no degendered higher education institution because we are not machines. We have implicit biases. So we have to be more cognizant about all these implicit biases and start to think outside the box a little bit to implement unique pipelines to drive more women in, let them stay, lower the attrition risk for women leaving academia. And we have to think about how we can make progress. So, for example, putting a childcare room in a conference doesn't help. I really went out of my way to ask the organizers whether I can bring my 11-year-old daughter with me. And the answer was, if I pay $800 registration fee, she can join. It shouldn't be the case. And as the career stages progress, there is a queen bee phenomena. Women are singled out and they start to act more like men. And I think, and this is what I refer to as queen bee phenomena, I think this shouldn't be the case. I think women have to do something about it too. And there is another stereotype that I would like to address, which is the tear factor, which I keep seeing when I work with women. I think we should do something about a little bit breaking the stereotype, just keeping our tears away from the workplace. I think this would help, because this is something I see when I work with women, and I think women can do something about it. And I think a lot falls on the families, schools, society, government, and funding bodies to increase the woman presence in science and academia. And thanks very much for having me, and I apologize if I went over time.
Thank you. Sorry. Oh God, thank you so much. I'm choked up by your talk. I found it quite inspiring. I'm actually coming off of maternity leave myself. It's my first time, and I can definitely see that inspiring the new generation and enriching their lives is important, yes, but on a policy level, a lot of institutions need to change the way that they look at the new generation, as opposed to maybe seeing them as labor workforce, and instead of seeing them as inspirational, especially in areas where women and young girls are lacking. And it's maybe not even part of the interest of, are we doing enough to inspire them? Because I know there's so many organizations like Girls Who Code and so many charities that focus on STEM, but is there enough to retain them? And I think that's exactly what you're talking about, is that you're going into an institution which maybe is devaluing you and what you have to offer. Maybe it's a holistic approach or a different approach. And so it's not really a survivable environment for a young woman. And maybe then she's like, okay, I don't want to be here, or, I've found purpose elsewhere. So yeah, very, very inspiring. Thank you so much, Dr. Akaya.
My pleasure.
Now I'd like to introduce our next speaker, Dr. Peter White. Dr. White is an associate professor in science and environmental education at Deakin University. She has educated in classrooms, coordinated programs, and supported curriculum reform, preparing teachers across Canada and Australia. Dr. White also co-directs the Centre for Regenerating Futures. Dr. White, thank you so much for being here with us today, especially as it's near midnight in Australia, I hear, so where you're joining us from today. So I'm really, really very thankful you're here. Our first question is, in your February 2024 article, Agency in the Anthropocene, Education for Planetary Health, you discuss the importance of education for improvements in planetary health and educational reform. Do you think this educational reform is currently being implemented in school systems and institutions globally? If not, could you explain what is inhibiting this and what measures could be taken to facilitate its implementation? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me tonight. Yes, it's just hit 11 p.m, but we're going to push through. Getting started, I'd like to acknowledge the country that I'm on at the moment. I'm on Wurundjeri country near Naarm, near Melbourne, Victoria, in Australia. The article that you cited is one where we wrote about the experience that a number of us, or 4 of us in fact, had working with the OECD, or the Organizational for Economic Cooperation and Development, PISA assessment, Program for International Student Assessment. So just to give you a little bit of information about how that particular program works, years before the assessment is taken in science, reading or mathematics, a number of experts are convened, 8 in fact, internationally, and they revise the science framework. The OECD made a commitment to front and center climate change. And in order to do that in the best possible way, they convened an additional expert group, and I was lucky enough to be one of those, with 2 colleagues from the US and 1 from New Zealand. We felt really passionately that our deeper understanding of environmental education, and in fact the experience of our field for decades, wanted us, or it behoved us, to push on from the ideas of sustainability, where we are thinking about what it means to practice living with enough, for example. We wanted to push into responding to the data that we have from PISA, where we know our 15-year-olds from the 2006 data understood a little bit about geoscience. From the 2015 and the 2018 PISA assessment, we know that students understand the concepts of sustainability, but what is difficult is knowing what to do with it. So we defined agency in the Anthropocene, and we defined the concept with some really beautiful ideas, things about diversity of knowledge, appreciating multiple perspectives, intergenerational learning, things that aren't typically associated with science education. That and 3 competencies around the same were accepted and put into the framework, which is really quite outstanding. It also means that science education internationally is changing. The way that PISA is used around the world is that curriculum developers will look to this document to write the curriculum. Of course, it's going to be a big shift to turn. This is science education. It's a big practice, but there are lots of glimmering places out there that we can think about, places and countries that have policies in place already to forefront climate education. I could list a few: Finland, Taiwan, Indonesia, Argentina, Italy, the UK and Cambodia. They're leading the way. I'm a bit hesitant to say, but also disappointed to say, Australia doesn't have a current policy around climate change education. We also don't mention climate change very much in our current curriculum, which has undergone a review in the last couple of years. So it's disappointing that we find ourselves in that situation, but there are other opportunities. Curriculum is not the only way forward to bring change to science education. There are a number of projects happening that explore how this might work. For example, I'm part of an Australian Research Council funded project where we're working with scientists and teachers and students to co-design teaching and learning materials that take climate science into the classroom. It's a great project and it's really exciting, and we're having a lot of fun doing it. I'm also part of a centre that is co-hosting or hosting the Australian Climate Change Education Summit and Action Plan, where we're calling for voice from around Australia to tell us what they're currently doing about climate change education. What do they want to do and what do they need to do it? Once we have that information, we'll design it as an action plan and submit it to our parliamentarians, hopefully for action. So there's lots going on, but we need to then pay attention to the school communities. Often what is being taught is the impacts of climate, the causes of climate, without allowing our young people thoughts towards what are they going to do about it. To change this situation, perhaps we need to provide policy support to our education community, the school leaders, the principals, as well as those guiding teachers who have always taught from a point of passion. Professor Paul Hart told us in the early 2000s that teachers who have a passion around the environment will teach it, regardless of the school or the curriculum policy. So yes, we need to give those teachers an opportunity to do their best work, but we also need to support those who are not the early adopters, who are the next row in our offence, in our education teaching, to think about what do they need. They need training, they need support, they need resources. And I also want to add school principals to that list and have some thought given to the communities that they're leading and how they can prioritize the needs of their young people. And as I wrap up today, I want to say that we are dealing with socio-ecological challenges in the climate crises, and that's plural for me, not just singular. And that means we're not looking at the environmental impacts or issues around the world. We're actually looking at socio-ecological challenges. That means how human societies are impacting our environment. It's quite a different way of taking up the ideas of climate change, and it's one that lands the responsibility right in our human societies. Certainly, I want to also think about the societies that are creating the most impact are not necessarily those most impacted. And I will leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. White. It was an honor to have you speak here, and I agree that we do need to reform climate education in order to make advancements in planetary health. Just like you said, we all need to model those countries that are the leaders in reforming education currently. Now, I'm pleased to introduce our next speaker, Dr. Rebecca Upton. Dr. Upton is a professor of global public and environmental health at Colgate University. She is also a medical anthropologist and global health scholar, and is committed to research in Southern Africa on issues of gender, migration, and reproductive health. Her work has been supported over the years by the J. William Fulbright Foundation and the Andrew Mellon Foundation, among others, for original field research in Botswana. Dr. Upton, thank you so much for being with us today. Our first question to you is, as a professor teaching gender, in what ways do you encounter bias and stereotypes of women in academia? How do you think we can minimize these gender stereotypes in primary and secondary education and be better able to invest in women in science, technology, and innovation?
Thank you, Vildan, for having me today. Thank you to everyone. I had the good fortune of meeting Vildan at a class that we were teaching at Colgate that was geared towards high school students in the area. And the class was Gender and Global Health. And I think it sparked a much bigger conversation that we'll continue to have, this session included. I want to focus on a positive, I suppose, before I talk about some of the challenges and stereotypes. I have a 6.5-year-old daughter, and this morning I told her what I was doing as I, was getting ready for work, and she says, "I see women in science all the time, Mama." And so I guess I have some hope for the future of those, at least in elementary school at the moment. Whether that falls off in her educational lifetime remains to be seen. When I was a grad student, and this is many, many years ago now, but when I was a grad student, I was part of a group of scholars who had been asked, both faculty and grad students, to help put together a conference on demographic approaches to population health. We were looking at the social determinants of health. And one of the senior faculty and scholars at one point said to me, "Well, will you help get all the tea and coffee ready for part of this conference seminar?" And we had been very much focused on gathering papers, editing them, right? Eventually an edited volume emerged out of this work. For many of us, it was one of our early kind of quasi-publications. We wrote part of, the preface, but it was really challenging to figure out how to address his request. It was his request, right? And I was willing to pitch in, pull my own weight, but I couldn't stop thinking about whether he had asked me because I was a female grad student, right, or a female scholar or future colleague. And so I agreed, but I sent him my CV. And I think it was a pivotal moment, not that I didn't do the work to help support such an intellectual and collaborative endeavor, but it gave me a sense of, I need to be the one to continue in the absence of any sort of formal structures to keep promoting my ability and role as a scholar and a future scholar. And so those are two just at the personal level, reflections on stereotypes and bias in academia. One where I'm looking forward to, how my daughter sees herself in the sciences, and to the kind of systemic and still ongoing assumptions about who does the invisible work in academia. And sometimes that has to do with advising. I carry a heavier advising load than some of my colleagues. But I think we need to move always beyond the personal, of course, to the professional and the policy. So a good deal of my research, as Vildan said, has been in Southern Africa with women who are both crafting material culture baskets for sale. They have contracts with Epcot and the Disney corporations, and they are the primary breadwinners in a society where historically the impact of colonialism meant that men were forced to out-migrate for work in diamond and gold mines. The impact of the HIV/AIDS pandemic over the years has meant that they were more vulnerable, while at the same time, providing the care and the financial standing for families and generations. So I bring those examples into my teaching, into my scholarship all the time. I think it's important that we see examples, that we really do see examples of women in our own lives, but in the examples that we use, whether it's in a PowerPoint or a published article. All of this sounds sort of simple, but again, I think my training as an anthropologist first and then a public health professional later means that I think quite seriously about those social determinants of health, how culture change moves at a glacial pace, but can move. We shape it, we shift it, our assumptions and expectations. I try to move with some work that I do with the National Women's Business Council here in the US towards more policy-oriented suggestions. So I can write and publish all I want about Southern Africa, about the Marshall Islands, where we're seeing a lot of syndemic gender and environment challenges. But it really comes down to where can your voice be heard in policy organizations and approaches. And so I try not to be too pessimistic. I really do try to be the optimist in both examples and publications. I would suggest to anyone wanting to think about stereotypes in women in science, and so maybe this is my takeaway for everyone, is to watch the documentary Picture a Scientist. I've had some of my college students here at Colgate, whether in neuro or bio or in public health, and even across disciplines, watch that and have a really interesting discussion about the navigation of STEM fields and places where interdisciplinarity is important in real life. So it's contemporary, it's useful. Again, Picture a Scientist. If you haven't seen it, it's worth it. So clearly I could keep talking for like a whole hour. So I think I will end here and look forward to hearing everyone else. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Upton. My takeaways from your talk is that be positive, but be your own advocate in male-dominated areas. I work in technology, so you have to not ask for the space, you have to almost carve out your own space and say, okay, this is my boundaries and this is what I'm here for. And I hope I took away what you were trying to convey, but thank you so much. I'd now like to introduce our next speaker, Dr. Omnia El Umrani. Dr. El Umrani is a medical doctor and was the first official youth envoy for both the president of the 27th UN Climate Change Conference, COP27, and the Egyptian Minister of Foreign Affairs. She was then also appointed as health envoy for COP28. Dr. El-Amrani has attended the last 5 UN climate change conferences, representing either the International Federation of Medical Students Association, advocating for more than 1.3 million medical students worldwide, or representing youth globally. She has over 7 years of experience in climate change and health policy, research and education. Dr. Amrani, thank you so much for being with us today. Our first question to you is, in your 2021 article, A Planetary Health Blind Spot, which looks at the untapped potential of women to safeguard nature and human resilience in low and middle income countries, you discuss with other authors the importance of empowering women and including women from LMICs in decision-making processes. How do you think increased women from LMICs in leadership roles can aid the development of innovative solutions for sustainability and the fight against current global environmental and health crises? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. And I've been really inspired by all the previous interventions, especially the one around climate change education, which was a big part of my work as a medical student, on integrating climate change in medical curriculum. But for that specific area of work, I was very fortunate to be working with Dr. Nicole de Paula, who is this incredible Brazilian woman leader who decided to establish for the first time an organization that focused on empowering and building the capacity of women from LMICs to lead the science, but also the advocacy for planetary health. And we did a lot of convening with incredible women who had their own solutions, organizations, and a lot of work that focused on the intersection between health and climate change under the umbrella of planetary health. But what we have seen consistently, and I've personally seen that being a part of the UN Climate Change Conference and negotiations since 2018, that there has been an underrepresentation of women leaders, either women who are leading the delegations of country representatives and negotiators going to the conference, but also leading organizations that focus on climate change or planetary health. And it's even less for women from low middle income countries. And we did a survey that showed that, and that was in 2019, and this number has improved, and there are more women leaders coming to the climate conference. But even then, it was only 41 out of 196 delegations of countries were led by women, so less than 20%. And even organizations that work on global health, less than 17% of these leaderships in these organizations were coming from low middle income countries, and less than 5% of them were women. And the argument that we wanted to make is that women and girls are disproportionately affected by the impacts of climate change on their health and well-being, as well as access to education, healthcare services, and so on. And we have seen that even more exacerbated over the years. I was recently in Africa Climate Week in Kenya, and many women farmers were there from the indigenous communities around Nairobi, and they were sharing that because of climate change that has led to crop failure and drought, and this meant that as farmers they were unable to provide income for their families, and this led to them experiencing increased gender-based violence and domestic violence because of their inability to provide for their families. And also they've seen a rise in the rates of FGM, female genital mutilation, because of the economic impacts that climate change has led. So you can see how women are disproportionately affected. This also can go into households because of the high levels of indoor air pollution that is also affecting more women, but also extreme heat is leading to impacts on pregnant women and neonatal outcomes. But at the same time, there's also many research that has been done that also proves that women are more likely to with a higher mortality and morbidity because of climate-related disasters, affected in terms of access to healthcare services, to maternal healthcare services during such climate extreme events. And even though we are disproportionately affected, this is not reflected in the leadership in climate policies and decision making. And many women are experiencing this challenge of being part of the climate negotiation table where the decisions are being made that is disproportionately affecting them the most. And that is why it has been established within the climate negotiation space, a women and gender constituency that has been advocating for considering and centering gender equality and health at the heart of the climate negotiation process. And now a gender action plan is being developed by countries, and in a way a framework on how to address climate change, but also allocate funding, resources, planning, and consider the impact of climate change on women's health, but also empowering women leaders to be in the decision-making spaces around climate change.
Thank you so much, Dr. Alamani. Thank you for telling us about your experiences, and I do believe we can learn a lot about how women need to be at the decision-making process on every level because they are often the most affected. Thank you. Now, I'd like to introduce our final speaker for this round, Ms. Ursula Gately. Ms. Gately is the Community Building and Engagement Coordinator at the Planetary Health Alliance. Before joining the Planetary Health Alliance, she earned a degree in Biology of Global Health. She has also established several organizations, a notable one being Curatera, a research journal focused on intersectional and transdisciplinary environmentalism. Additionally, she was recognized as one of the American Public Health Association's 2022 Student Champions for Climate Justice. Ms. Gately, thank you so much for being with us today. Our first question to you is, what benefits do you see around you and in your work in the Planetary Health Alliance of including women in decision-making processes in the current fight against global environmental and health crises, especially climate change?
Thank you so much for having me. It's been great to hear about the work and thoughts of my fellow panelists. First, I want to just briefly acknowledge that I am in Washington, D.C. on the ancestral lands of the Nutchkantak and Piscataway peoples. In planetary health, and particularly within the Planetary Health Alliance where I work, the prevalence of women in decision-making roles is generally larger than in similar fields. For instance, on our team of 12 at PHA, there are 9 women and 3 men. Additionally, many of the major researchers and practitioners in the field and social movement are women. While it can be intriguing to explore why this trend exists and what draws women to this particular field, I believe it's perhaps more important in answering this specific question to emphasize the value gained from our engagement. It's essential to spotlight the impact of women and work of women in combating climate change, biodiversity change, and similar topics, and amplifying the diverse array of voices in this space. In many ways, I can state the benefit of having women in leadership in planetary health or climate action quite simply, in stating that the more diverse and inclusive a group and the environment it's set in, the better the problem-solving abilities within that group, as we can foster a space where people are comfortable sharing ideas and speaking out, oftentimes speaking out against the norms or status quo that we find ourselves in. With topics like planetary health with its grand and global challenges, we require global solutions constructed by diverse global teams. While the scope of focus of each practitioner may vary from the hyperlocal to the national, international, or even planetary, each has a key role to stimulating a great transition in the way that we live, contributing to the assurance of a livable, ecologically just future. So we have the responsibility as members of the planetary health community and climate action community more broadly to make sure that we are elevating and highlighting the work of women and individuals of varied backgrounds and identity, and to creating in this way a more collaborative, engaging, and accessible space if we seek to address these challenges. I think young women in particular are actively shaping the future we will inherit by demanding action and accountability, and in many ways challenging exploitative hierarchical systems, advocating for a shift away from resource-oriented or extraction-focused views of environmental systems. You can see that with figures like Greta Thunberg, Leah Thomas, who's founder of Intersectional Environmentalist, Wawa Gathru, founder of Black Girl Environmentalist, Christy Drontham at Brown Girl Green. These are all individuals that are emblematic of this movement, demonstrating how women, especially young women, are driving the change and reshaping the narrative of environmental activism. We're entering into leadership roles around the world in order to be the change we wish to see and to shape that future. However, I'm also acutely aware that the societal and social barriers persist, hindering the full participation and success of women, especially those from marginalized genders and communities in low and middle income countries and in the global South. In light of these challenges, it's imperative that we actively work to elevate voices that have been put to the periphery of these conversations. Embracing intersectionality and acknowledging the diverse experiences and struggles faced by individuals of different genders, including trans, non-binary, and femme folks, is paramount for fostering inclusivity and enhancing problem-solving abilities within the planetary health community and in related spaces. In planetary health in particular, I think there's a tremendous potential for growth and inclusivity. So there are a few reasons for this. One, it's a relatively young field. It was really founded in 2015 with the Rockefeller-Lancet Commission on Planetary Health, although, I mean, it certainly draws from structures and systems that came before, and including Indigenous ways of knowing that vastly predate that publication. But both because it's a young field and it's also a solutions-oriented field, I believe that it welcomes people with many different focuses, including those actively working towards gender equity, those engaging with ecofeminist activism or intersectional environmentalism, and it welcomes everyone to join in working towards our shared goals of analyzing and addressing the impacts of human disruption to Earth's natural systems, to all life on Earth.
Thank you, Ursula. Thank you so much. That was quite interesting to hear, especially some of the brown girl green I've written down. I wanted to look into that. Some great nods there. But also around elevating voices and looking at intersectionality as it should be almost kind of the baseline standard of how we do our research and how we look into things. So thank you so much for your time today. We are moving on solely to the second round of questions. So in this session, again, me and Vivian will switch over and we've got a second question to ask all our speakers. This may be potentially a bit shorter than the first, so just want to give a nod there. We will start this session with Dr. Bilur Akkaya. Before we ask the second question, I just, again, just shorter responses to make sure that we are on time. Our second question to you today is, in your working environment every day, what progress do you see being made in providing more opportunities for women in the field of science, technology, and innovation?
The short answer to this is I am seeing progress being made. There is an increased awareness of gender in the workplace. There are bigger DEI initiatives and inclusivity that I'm seeing. And I think we are progressing in this area. So I'll leave it at that. And progress is possible, but we just need to make it more sustainable.
Thank you so much, Dr. Akkaya. Have you frozen or?
Oh no, I am done. I finished answering, so I'll give enough opportunity to the other panelists to be able to answer.
Thank you so much. It's great to hear that we're making progress in this field, especially since we really need it as the amount of global crises amps up and we need to fight these crises. Now I'd like to ask our second question to Dr. Peter White. Dr. White, our second question to you is, education is indeed very important for planetary health, but even though women are often the most affected by climate change, they often do not get enough education on environmental topics and are not included in the decision-making processes. In your opinion, how critical is education of women in particular, and women leadership in science, technology, and innovation for advancements in the fight against climate change and for improvements in planetary health?
Well, thank you very much for that question. I've been thinking about this one all day, actually. I feel pretty strongly about how you phrased the question. So let me give this as a bit of a response. I think everyone needs education about climate change. I think we've been hearing that in the panel this afternoon. There's still a lot of work to be done. Our schools are not supported to step forward to support young people to learn the kind of information that they need to learn to be able to plan, consider their futures, which will be very different to any of the futures we've experienced living out as we grow into adulthood. I think our young people are facing uncertainty in ways that is really very frightening. So everyone is managing some sense of eco-anxiety to some point, even I suggest the deniers, although I'm really pleased that they are getting littler airtime about it. So I guess there's a lot to learn in climate science, and I think it's quite intricate. But again, remembering that the climate science is only one part of what we're attending to here, because it's our social systems that have generated the impact on our Earth systems. And so when we take that kind of perspective, it's a very complex situation. And unpacking that complexity can be really tricky, especially if you're thinking about a primary or secondary or even early learning context. So there are causes we can think about, there are actions that we can take. And I think if we're to think about those kind of things, I'm not convinced that bringing gender into that discussion is particularly fruitful, especially if we're going to attend to a binary in our gender analysis. I think that's kind of concerning. I feel like the toxicity, the masculine toxicity that many of us experience in many workplaces is really concerning. We heard Bilal speak about that in the data that she represented earlier, even in the stories that she told about how women treat other women, I think is a toxicity that is pervasive and really unfortunate, uncomfortable. And perhaps intersectionality is a way that helps us attend to these concerns and practices in a way that frees us from having to talk binaries. I also want to take a little moment to challenge the language that we're using around climate change, the fight against climate change, the militarization of our language. Again, is this toxic masculinity that we're seeing. We are, in fact, as I've said before, and I'm sure many of you agree, in socio-ecological turmoil and crises. So the fight that we have, let's not make that against ourselves. There's got to be opportunities to work together across our societies, intersectionality, to bring forward better futures. And I'm going to leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. White. Thank you. I mean, we are all here to learn, and I find that quite useful. I think when you step back from environments like this, you can get back into the rhythm of maybe using more masculine language or militarization of language or weaponizing the language against ourselves, which isn't very helpful. Yeah, I can see that. And also in terms of intersectionality being a baseline, but just a starting point maybe of where we can take the discussion rather than an end all be all or a cure. Thank you so much. Right, we will get on to our next speaker, Dr. Rebecca Upton. And next, a second question to you is, at Colgate, you teach courses on both global, public and environmental health, as well as gender. In your opinion, what benefits can women bring to discussions on global, public and environmental health? And how important is women leadership in these fields?
Thank you. I like the discussion of not just intersectionality, but interdisciplinarity. And I think that has been a huge driver in some of the success of global, public and environmental health as a discipline, as a field that's gone from thinking about international health in a very sort of, neo-colonial model to something that's more inclusive. And so global public and environmental health is actually a field, a discipline where we have diverse representation in terms of students, graduate, undergraduate, as well as professionals. The WHO and the NIH report that 70% of the labor in this field is done by women. But the thing that should concern us is that only about 1/4 of leadership roles are occupied by women in this science. And so there's still work to be done. My answers to the previous questions are driven by a desire to be positive and frame the progress. But I think we can't stop thinking about who's doing the work in the field and what drives our interest, as Senator May said, to actually do something with the knowledge we glean. And so I think it is important that we engage, and the WHO and NIH are a little dichotomous in their language about gender, but it is important to think about who's doing the work or who can tell us through qualitative research. And I'm a big fan of both mixed methods, right? Qualitative and quantitative, to really inform us about the application or the experience, the lived experience of climate change and pressures in everyday life. So perhaps just leaving with an example of early research that I did, and that has come back around into contemporary discourse. Women in Eastern Kenya who were experiencing firsthand some of the high PM 2.5, like high particulate matter impacts as a result of indoor cook stoves, and really grappling with how to address this as a serious health threat when the social determinants of everyday life, gendered expectations meant that they were carrying more of the load of food preparation. This is not isolated to the Kenyan example, but gathering data from lived experience of individuals can help us, as we try for better informed, richer and more in-depth policies and practices. And I think that's important to think globally that way, that intersectionality and interdisciplinarity is key. So examples and good data, all the more important as we think about the next generation and the challenges to environmental and reproductive health, certainly at the forefront. So thank you so much for including me in this.
Thank you so much, Dr. Upton. It was an honor to have you speak here, and we learned a lot from your experiences. The statistics you gave are really very interesting. I do think women need to have a lot more leadership roles in science in order for us to advance. Thank you. And now I'd like to ask our second question to Dr. Omnia Alamrani. Dr. Alamrani, our second question to you is, in a talk with the New York Times a year ago, you and the other speakers discussed the importance of women as agents of change and the importance of women leadership. To inspire more girls and women to become agents of change, how can we make the achievements of women leaders in STEM, ICT, and the medical and environmental fields more visible to them and to larger audiences, especially in the developing world?
Yeah, thank you so much for this question. And I think from my experience, creating networks similar to the network I was part of, Women Leaders for Planetary Health, is a great way of convening women leaders from different disciplines and sectors together. And this is the beauty of working on an issue like climate change or planetary health, that it brings in people from all over the sectors and disciplines towards a specific issue. And we used to have every other Friday where we interview or feature an incredible women leader, whether in STEM or in climate or in health. And we would have a 30-minute interview with her, sharing her personal experience, her work, to all the women we have in our network. We also created this really engaging and great program, which is kind of a mentorship program where we connect women leaders as mentors with mentees. So young aspiring women who are in their early careers, or students who would like to learn about a particular area of work, whether it's in climate policy or in health or in science or research, together with another incredible women leader to develop this relationship. And I think mentorship is so critical in terms of amplifying that work. And I think what we also is a big challenge is how we identify, and we have a lot of science around impacts, but we find so little, and it's a bit challenging to identify interventions, solutions, and stories of what women leaders are doing at the grassroots level, similarly at the global level. So I think creating spaces and opportunities for stories to be shared, not only within academic literature, which is very important, but also to have other platforms to share that work, whether in newsletters or whether having these sort of dialogues where women come together and start sharing their amazing work. Having this opportunity of these dialogues to be done online and in person is so important. And finally, having these mentorship opportunities is a great way of empowering other women, building capacity, rapport, and coming together.
Thank you, Dr. Elamrani. I've noted down a couple of, so it's the mentorship program that you're doing, and it's increasing visibility of women leaders. That's pretty inspirational. I was just going to say, is there a link to any of this mentorship program? And
yeah, I will share it now. I'm not sure whether it's running right now or not, but I will share with you the program.
It's great to have visibility on what's being done and shared around. Thank you. Now I'd like to ask our second question to our final speaker, Ms. Ursula Gately. You founded Terra, a journal on the current environmental issues in our world. How can we make this valuable information on planetary health, climate change, and other global health crises more visible and accessible to large audiences, especially to women?
Thank you for that question. I think it's in many ways $1 million question, just like many of the ones that have been asked today. And it's one I also imagine does not just have one simple answer, but I'll do my best. So I think that there are really two prongs that I think about when I think about this visibility of information as well as then access. And in terms of addressing that, I think one is content generation and equity considerations in terms of what materials are being curated as well as then amplified. And then the second being the actual dissemination of information and the uptake of knowledge that results. So with respect to those equity considerations, I think it's incredibly important in framing this discussion to talk about uplifting scholars from different backgrounds and experiences. That includes the sciences, arts, humanities, social sciences, but also those outside of traditional academic contexts. Those people that are working on these topics in different areas, both geographically and otherwise, and unique contexts. In many ways, this kind of highlights the importance of showcasing the diverse voices and perspectives within each of these fields. And through that, we challenge stereotypes and inspire more women to engage with environmental issues. And then that second prong being content dissemination. So one aspect I think it's important to address this is curating open access resources and using accessible platforms and mediums to disseminate information, such as social media, podcasts, webinars, newsletters, or open access journals. These platforms can reach a wide audience and cater to diverse access needs as well as preferences and information consumption. The next kind of points towards recognition of the importance of multilingual outreach to reach diverse communities of women around the world. So translating content into different languages can facilitate access and understanding, broadening the audience for environmental education and advocacy. And then the last facet of this being community engagement, which is something I think a lot in my role as the community building and engagement coordinator at Planetary Health Alliance. So engaging with communities both online and offline to foster dialogue, enhancing knowledges and raise awareness. I think creating spaces for discussion and participation can empower women to become agents of change in addressing environmental challenges. So one way I facilitate community building in my current role is through leading the PHA's Planetary Health Campus Ambassador, or PHCA, program. This program formally recognizes next generation leaders in planetary health on academic campuses and within international spaces and the international planetary health community at large. So during the program, ambassadors build their planetary health network and gain leadership and organizational skills with the support of their diverse cohort, PHA staff, and alliance members. Campus ambassadors are empowered to take leadership on their campuses and beyond, to educate their community and to facilitate collaborations between existing disciplines and initiatives within the scope of human health and environmental change. I think programs like this one can facilitate the growth of our worldwide community of practitioners and enhance the awareness of our global community regarding environmental initiatives, planetary health, and those pressing global environment and health challenges that we face.
Thank you so much, Ms. Gately. These methods are really great ways to spread this information, as people do need to know this information for us to be able to combat the effects of climate change better and for us to advance in planetary health. Thank you so much. And thank you to all of our distinguished speakers. I'd now like to open the Q&A session to anybody who has any questions. Does anybody have any questions for our speakers? All right, so if nobody has any questions, I'd just like to end this event with a few memorable quotes from our speakers. However, before that, we would like to ask everyone to turn on their cameras if they are able to, including attendees, and wave briefly. We just want to take a group picture together to commemorate this occasion. So we'll just wait a few seconds for everyone to turn on their camera. And all the attendance as well, non-speaker attendance. Okay, Ms. Vuktas will be taking this photo, so we can take the photo in 3, 2, 1. All right, thank you so much, everybody. Now I'd just like to share a few quotes from all of our speakers and from Senator May that I found particularly inspiring. One from Senator May was, "We need more women in the STEM field to study science and go into government, not just because of diversity, because women use and share scientific knowledge differently." I thought this was very important for understanding the importance of women leadership. And from Dr. Akkaya, the quote, "We don't understand the unique challenges women may face," and she also said we must think outside the box. I thought this was very inspiring. A quote from Dr. Peter White, one talking about educational reform, which I thought was a very interesting topic. She said, "Often what we teach is about the effects of climate change, not what students can do to combat it." I thought this was very important because educational reform is very important for advancements in planetary health. From Dr. Becca Upton, the statistics she shared, 70% of labor in science and health is done by women, but only about a quarter of the leadership roles are filled by women. And we need to pay attention to who's doing the work and who is leading. I thought the statistics were very interesting. And from Miss Gately, she said young women can especially lead the way by challenging gender bias structures, and they can drive the change and reshape environmental activism. And lastly, from Dr. El-Omrani, she said, "Creating networks is a great way of convening women from all sectors and disciplines to a specific issue like climate change, and creating space and opportunities for women to share their work and their experiences is very important, as it can empower other women." All right, thank you again, everybody, and thank you so much to our distinguished speakers and Senator May. Additionally, thank you to Nargis Valieva, Nicole Vasilev, Jocelyn, Angelina, and Betul Orhan for helping us with the preparations for this event. Thank you to the entire team at Young Women Leaders for Planetary Health. And lastly, a special thank you to Dr. Nicole DePaula, founder of Women Leaders for Planetary Health and our cherished mentor. Thank you so much, everybody. It was an honor to have you all here. Thank you again, and have a great day, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Bye.
Have a great day, night for some. Take care.
Thank you.